What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Matt Bors. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's happening? Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. You are working on some great books out there. If people aren't familiar, you got your Justice Warrior series with Ben Clarkson, and then you had Volume 2 with Vote Harder, and now you're working with Fred Harper with the Toxic Avenger. Like, so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, I'm real happy with the stuff I have coming out. It's like feels like comics I've wanted to create for a while.
Yeah. So how did you always? So did you always love comics then,
Oh,
growing up as a kid, or is this something that got into later in life?
no, no, I've always wanted to do do comics. Basically, a singular focus I've had my entire life since I was, 2 or 3. And then the briefest story of my career is that drew comics growing up. Always, I wanted to draw superhero stuff, and then, I got into kind of indie comics and underground comics when I was a teenager, and then when I was about 18 or 19, it was around the time of 9/11 happened right a few days before I turned 18, and then in the run up to the invasion of Iraq, I got into political cartooning, and I did that for 18 years. And I ran the Nib too, which was a website for nonfiction comics and political cartoons for 10 years. So that all wrapped up last year. Wait, yeah, last year. It's only been a year. Last August and September, I shut down the Nib after a long time and, moved directly into doing genre comics, which was, something I had always wanted to do, like I said, but I just kind of had a successful career in political cartooning for a while. And then, but now I'm switching gears.
Yeah. So how did you? So both your series, Toxic Avenger and Justice Warriors, are connected with Hoy. How did you get hooked up with them?
Me and Ben submitted the first volume of Justice Warriors to a couple publishers, Dark Horse, Oni, Image, like all
Yep.
those. And some of them were interested. We had a couple people that were interested, and Ahoy was interested and, just felt right. Like they pay decent rates. They are real cool to work with. They're a small company and they were kind of going to let us do what we wanted to do,
Yeah.
all right. Like some of the other companies, they had bigger names, but their deals weren't as good, or they were like, "Oh, can you do this as a 4 issue miniseries because the market is the way it is," and we didn't want to.
Yep.
So Ahoy was the best deal, and it was a good decision because like we're doing more Justice Warriors with them, and then I brought Toxic Avenger to them, and it's their first licensed comic. So I'm basically doing all my current work right now through Ahoy.
Right. Well, it's if people aren't familiar with the Hoy comics, I mean, they have some great series out there, like Second Coming, um,
Yeah.
and I'm blanking on all the others, but I love because they're so good. Babs, we got right,
Yeah,
like
the new Babs series. They have a couple Mark Russell series, My
yeah,
Bad, and the Wrong Earth series, which is really
yeah.
good,
The Tom
which is
Pyre one is
and he's
fantastic.
the editor there, the main
Yeah.
editor. So he's who I work with, and I do. And weirdly, I know Mark Russell from way back in the day, before he ever got into comics. He was around Portland. We had some mutual friends, and we became pretty close. Like I've known that guy for a long time, and that he was part of it. It was just like, he was there, and I
Yeah.
saw the work he was doing, and I thought it would be a good spot for me because we have similar vibes doing satirical stuff.
So how did you then? You said you brought Toxic Avenger to Ahoy. How did that kind of come about?
Last year at San Diego Comic-Con, I approached Lloyd Kaufman, who has a Troma booth there, and just straight up pitched him on me relaunching it as a comic. I mean, I didn't give him the full pitch then and there, but I introduced myself and I said I wanted to do this and listed some of my bona fides. And not that they're that impressive, but he seemed into it. I mean, he gave me his card. I mean, it was kind of like, you don't know what that means, right? It could mean
Right.
nothing. It could mean he ignores your email later. But they didn't. It actually went surprisingly smooth for how this stuff usually works. I mean, I wrote a full outline for the whole series, plus other ideas for other stuff I want to do. And I kind of went to Ahoy and Troma at the same time, essentially. I mean, I said, you know, if you're into this, I can try to get my publisher on board. And I went to the publisher and said, if you're into this, I can try to get Troma on board. And Ahoy was my first choice. If
Yeah.
they didn't go for it, they had never done licensed comics before, so it wasn't necessarily a sure thing. But I thought if Ahoy didn't go for it, I could probably find another publisher that would be willing to do it.
Right.
So, but Ahoy went for it, and it was another good thing.
So if you approached Lloyd and Ahoy with this idea and project, you had to have a love, I'm assuming, for the character. Was it the movie? Was it Toxic Crusaders, the show? Like, where did this love for Toxie originate?
Uh, you know, it's both the movies and the show. When I was little, I was born in 83. So the cartoon is 91. And I had probably seen the movies by then, you know?
Yeah.
That was back in the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, I was watching all that stuff. I love all that, violent stuff that's real influential on me. Like, I mean, RoboCop, RoboCop is a big influence on Justice Warriors. And so a lot of the gore actually in Toxic Avenger stuck with me. It was probably, the goriest thing I'd seen up until that point. I don't remember seeing it for the first time. Like I was definitely way too young. Um, but I wasn't way too young. I was fine. I didn't turn it, everything is
It
fine. It's
worked
just
out,
a
right?
movie.
It's all
Yeah,
good.
it's just a movie. I mean, I have a 7-year-old. I probably wouldn't show her the Toxic Avenger, but it was different times.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always, I've always been into mutants and stuff. I mean, that's something that's both in Justice Warriors and Avenger, and some of the editorial cartoons I was doing my last few years was kind of like a wasteland future where it also had like cyborgs and mutants and all sorts of stuff. So I just love that stuff. I love Mad Max. I love mutants. I love violent satire stuff. So it's just, but I would say it's not as influential to me as other stuff. I mean, I hadn't really revisited Toxic Avenger in a
Okay.
long time, because not much else was done with the character. Like they made multiple sequels, but it feels like it's been really dormant for 20 years, which I think it has been kind of.
Yeah.
And it was just in my mind as a character that I have ideas for. I have a lot of characters I have ideas for, like a lot of comic writers. But I'm not getting put on X-Men or Batman right away. So this seemed attainable. And I was actually surprised. I was like, for how easy it went getting the
Yeah.
license and everything, I was actually surprised that no one else had done anything with it. Because I feel like I'm doing a new iteration of Toxic Avenger, and it doesn't feel like I'm not the 10th writer doing my take on it.
Right.
So whether people like it or not, it's kind of like there's a lot of pent up maybe demand for some new Toxic Avenger stuff, like there's the movie, of course,
Right.
which a lot of people know about is supposed to come out. I don't know what the deal is with that. They haven't landed like a streaming deal or something. But hopefully that does come out. My comic doesn't have anything to do with it, but I think it will only, raise interest in the Toxic Avenger again, so that'll be good.
Yeah. So what was about Toxic Avenger then, like with this outline that you had that you kind of wanted, where would your idea originate for the story that you wanted to tell with Toxie?
Combining elements from the movies with the Toxic Crusaders cartoon is really what I'm doing. So, that's it's not a major spoiler, but it's like I mean, I've been telling people if you're reading through this series, you will start to see characters from the Toxic Crusaders pop up in new ways. And that is ultimately where we're heading, hopefully. Like, meaning a world that is similar to the cartoon, but reimagined and for adults with sort of R-rated violence, I guess it would be
Yeah.
would be the best way to say it. But if you remember the cartoon, or if you don't, it took place during this time where they were making all sorts of cartoons out of everything to sell toys. They did a RoboCop cartoon, Swamp Thing. Everything was toys. That's really what the model was, is that the cartoons were there to sell toys. The Toxic Crusaders was kind of like Captain Planet, except it was a cool Captain Planet. Captain Planet was earnest and had these kids, and when they combine their rings, the power of, heart and wind, and they create Captain Planet, and it had environmental lessons and pollution villains. And Toxic of Crusaders was kind of like that too, except it was a little bit cooler. It was like they were mutants, and it was not as not as hokey, I guess. I mean, if you go back and watch them now, it's kids stuff. It's not like it's great and holds up. But so I always thought it was a cool cartoon. It was cool.
Yeah.
And I'm drawn to that stuff. Like I said, I love mutants. I love X-Men, and I like the weirder mutants in X-Men, right? Because that's what makes it interesting to me. It's like I don't know if everybody's hating and fearing the main X-Men team, Cyclops, Psylocke, Colossus. These are like the hottest people on planet Earth. Like everybody would want to be like them. They're in like peak physical condition. But, the people that look repulsive and have powers that, mess up their lives and are dangerous and everything, that's the cool stuff. So I guess the answer to your question is that the sort of environmental satire
Mhm.
of the Toxic Crusaders is something that's at the core of this. Um, it is trying to be pretty funny. Like I would say, Toxic Avenger is a couple things. It's like horror comedy. It's like a superhero parody. And even the movies, it does have some elements of like satire and stuff to say. I mean, it's not very political, but like, it throws a lot of shots at evil corporations and stuff
Right.
like that. So, I was trying to bring all those things together into a new mix.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, issue one has already come out, and then the time that this is dropping, issue two will come out. So if you haven't read issue one, like stop this podcast and go back and like, why? What are you doing? But what was it? Where was the choice for the structure? Because you kind of issue one, you did an interesting structure. That I really appreciated and liked. But what was that mindset behind how you wanted to structure that first issue?
Yeah, so I start on quarantine day 4, and you don't know what that means yet. It's it's unclear. They're in the middle of a crisis. Toxic Avenger exists. He's mutated. You get the impression very quickly that his mutation probably has something to do with this crisis, and it does. And then we go backwards through the days and you learn more about what's going on. And then ultimately, there was a toxic waste train spill, and the town is under quarantine. And sort of similar to what happened in Palestine, Ohio, 2 years ago, although nobody's turned into a mutant of superhuman size and strength that I'm aware of.
Right.
They probably just have chronic illnesses that will, dog them the rest of their life. So I wrote the entire script in chronological order, and have to do sort of the origin story. I
Yeah.
mean, I think doing an origin story is tricky because we've seen so many of them. Sometimes, when they do these, like when they reboot like the Ultimate Universe and stuff, the origin can be like the first 6 issues. They don't like put on the suit. And I didn't want to go that route, and I wanted to, after I wrote it chronologically, I really was challenging myself to do something more interesting with it because I'm like, you only get one shot on number one. They're super important. People buy them and then they drop off. And I just wanted to make an impression. So I decided to do it not solely as a gimmick, but because I wanted it to relate some of the feelings that I'm sure we can all relate to going through the pandemic of just like being in the middle of this crisis, not knowing everything that's going on, feeling a little bit of what the characters are feeling, even though they know the events of the prior days, they still actually don't know everything that's going on, and they're trying to piece things together. So that's really the gist of it. I don't do that through the whole book. I From number 2 on, we go chronological, but it does each issue begins with a 3-page segment of the before times, before he was mutated, in which you see more of the story that will become relevant as the series goes on, which mostly deals with his bullying, which is a huge aspect of this series and the character in general, obviously from the movies. But like that's another big focus of this for me.
Yeah. You're dealing with a lot of topics, right? That, we're processing through. Like you mentioned, we've all lived through this shared experience of COVID and those times of like a quarantine and, bullying, which I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with at some point. So like, how do you kind of, what's your approach for handling like these tougher topics? Your stuff like Vote Harder would, political
Yeah.
stuff and all of this. Like, how do you kind of process like what line and where you want to walk with those things?
Man, I don't know. It's something I've been doing for forever with political
Yeah,
cartoons. I mean, I used to do cartoons on every depressing topic on earth. I did a lot of cartoons about war, about, police shootings, and sometimes people would say, like people who agree with me on the issues would say like they don't like this stuff. Like it's not funny to them, right? It's real life.
yeah,
And that's fine. It's not for them. Like everybody has a different sense of humor. I mine tends to be dark, kind of. Um, I think it's a good way to talk about issues and process this
yeah.
stuff, I guess. So like I am, like I would say the three, I don't know, three or four things that Toxic Avenger is about is like bullying and social media stuff, which comes into the bullying aspect of it, um, and will play into things that happen later, like that the fact that on the online world exists is sort of inescapable in this world, right? Like, there's been a town put under quarantine. There's like mutated teens. Like the internet becomes aware of their existence, and that has ramifications in the series. And of course, the environmental satire and the anti corporate stuff. So, I mean, I'm going after a lot of targets, which is what I like to do. I like it to be kind of like I'm not necessarily trying to push my views, but I mean,
Yeah,
I obviously am doing it about things that I have opinions about. But
right.
like, ultimately I think you can just read it as a straightforward story and enjoy it. It's not like Toxie himself is not really a mouthpiece
Right.
because he's a teenager who isn't necessarily political and doesn't grasp everything that's going on to him. And that's what I actually like doing it through that vehicle, because it's like he is kind of naive.
Yeah.
And one of the core tenets, I think, of Toxic Avenger is that it's a parody of superhero stuff. So it's less earnest, and it's not like I don't think it would be spoiling anything to say like things backfire a lot in this series. Things keep getting worse. He's not like a Superman character where he makes the right choices and then no one gets hurt, and you know.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Is there a different approach at all when you're dealing with something like an original IP like you are with Justice Warriors versus something licensed and how you have to handle the licensed property?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a need to kind of meet well, a couple intersecting demands. Like you have to do something new, but you
Yeah,
have to not stray too far from it so that people like fans, and you have to create something that hopefully fans of it like, but also that new people can enjoy without the context of being growing up on the movies. And you're not going to satisfy everybody, but I do think that I'm creating something that's pretty in the spirit of some of the movies and the cartoon. um, so it might be different, it might be not everybody's cup of tea, I guess, but like the way I describe it is the movies were this real special thing. It's like the reason why people love Toxic Avenger, I think, is this low budget, schlocky movie that kind of relishes in its badness. It's very unpretentious to the point where it's almost exists in spite of mainstream film. It's kind of thumbing its eye at um, decorum, and certainly, it's a very politically incorrect movie in a lot of ways. Some of the stuff wouldn't fly in a mainstream release today, and they call it grade Z cinema. I've been in proudly, but I don't think you can make a grade Z comic in the same way. Like you
mm,
don't read it, you watch a movie with bad special effects or cheap special effects, maybe let's say, and it's fun, and the acting isn't A tier Hollywood acting, I think it's fair to say. And that can be fun to watch. But I think if you're reading a comic book and it's drawn crappily and you're
right.
like, it's just not the same experience. So I'm trying to make a good story with that has a little more substance than both the cartoons and the movies. Like that's what going back in time and looking at his time being bullied more is about, because the bullies are also mutated. So, hopefully people like it, because as I said at the beginning, I have multiple volumes of this stuff that I hope to do. There's a bigger story that I hope to tell, and I mean, things look good so far. Nothing's been greenlit or announced, but
Right.
I'm hoping to do more of these up to multiple volumes, really.
How long is this first initial run?
5 issues.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know exactly how we'll do it, but like I said, I am going to bring the Toxic Crusaders team together and well, I got a ton of ideas. I don't want to spoil them all because
Yeah.
people haven't even read the first arc. But like if this does well, I really have a 4 to 5 volume run here that I hope to do. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I feel confident I'll at least get one more volume, so I'll take it, as it
Right.
comes.
Yeah. Well, gang, go out and buy it and support it so we can get this volume.
Yeah.
Um, you know, where where is it with you with like decision making as well? So like, like how you want to tell the story. For example, like, Justice Warriors you had out in single issues, Justice Warriors Vote Harder. Well, it looks like it was written with single issues, but then came out as trade. Like, was that more like those things? Are those your decisions? Is that Ahoy editorial? Like,
It's more Ahoy. I
okay.
mean, we did initially start writing Justice Warriors as single issues, and then they came to us and said, we wanted to release it as a trade. Reason being, Justice Warriors sells well in trade because I think the audience for it are not like Wednesday shop people
Mm,
necessarily. They're people who are into comics, but a lot more casually. And then also the election. We didn't want to have the second issue or third issue come out around the election and then people totally lose interest in elections. So we wanted to kind of get it out a month or two before the election and try to promote it hard. Now, that being said, it doesn't deal explicitly with Trump and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And it wasn't written to be analogs to them at
yeah,
all. It's about elections and politics at a little bit higher level, but certainly relevant in the way that everybody is thinking about and talking about elections.
yeah. Well, and it makes sense too, right? Like you don't wanna have a Christmas themed comic coming
Yeah.
out in start in November and end in March, right? Like
Yeah,
so
exactly.
so there is reasons behind it. So a little bit more on Justice Warriors because it is fantastic. If you all haven't read it, so you've got 2 volumes of that. Is that another one of those worlds where because I feel like that's a world where you could have volume after volume of
Oh,
stories to tell.
we really want to. Yeah, we're going to be pitching the third volume soon, so it's not official, but we intend to do Justice Warriors really forever if people buy it. I mean, I'll write a volume a year for the next decade. Ben and I have, I mean, we don't only have the third volume in mind. I mean, we have ideas for like 10 volumes, and to talk about it in a way that might make sense to people who haven't read it is, it's a dystopian cop uh, drama story that has all sorts of crazy mutants and all sorts of stuff going on. But the main thing is that each volume is supposed to sort of take you to a different sector of society.
Mhm.
So like the first one is like the economy of Bubble City, the economy and social movements. There's a big protest movement and something's going on with it. And then the second one is an election, and which is sort of written as like a political thriller. There's assassination attempts, there's conspiracies, and we want to look at other things like the drug trade and sports, media, you know, prisons, so like each volume will sort of delve into a different aspect of society, sort of like how The Wire did,
Mhm.
honestly. That's actually something that we reference is like how The Wire works. Like there's main characters that go throughout the series, and then there's characters that pop up just for their, when they go to the docks or when they're doing the schools or whatever it is. So it's kind of like that. Obviously, tonally, it is not like The Wire at all. It's more like, Judge Dredd on mushrooms. But we want to keep telling stories in this universe. It's just like perfect for that.
Yeah. How do you kind of come about with your creative teams? Obviously, you did cartooning yourself, but you're leaning a lot more into writing these things. So how do you kind of like, working with Fred Harper or Ben, kind of figure out what teams that you want to be a part of?
My thing is you got to be if you want to work on a comic with me, you got to be better than me. Now, which is to say, that's not the highest bar in the world. I'm not that full of myself. But it's also not the lowest bar in the world either. If I can draw it better than you, then why don't I just do it myself?
Right.
So, with Fred Harper and Ben Clarkson, I feel like I'm working with like two really great artists. I mean, Ben's stuff on Justice Warriors is totally insane. His, I'm really lucky to have hooked up with him. I mean, he doesn't come from comics. He comes from animation, and Justice Warriors is his first comic, which if you look at, you would not believe because it's so good.
And
And
yeah,
Fred
even like the
Harper,
background and stuff, like it's not like just like, oh, we have a couple like blank scenes for a background. Like it's in depth.
no, no, it's incredibly detailed and dense, and then Fred Harper, is perfect for Toxic Avenger. I mean, I've been saying he's like sort of channeling some Simon Bisley and Richard Corbin for this. Um, and yeah, he's perfect. I mean, I'm I do have ideas for comics that I want to draw that feel like they're my ideas and I should draw them, but I have a lot of ideas for genre comics, even mainstream comics, superheroes type stuff
Yeah.
that I don't feel like I need to draw because we can find someone better that's better suited to the genre. And then also, doing a project, it's an incredible time commitment. So I I guess I would say maybe I have more ideas than I have a lot of ideas I want to get out, and I want to write 5 volumes of Toxic Avenger, and then I want to do some mainstream stuff, and I want to keep writing Justice Warriors. So I'm okay sort of relinquishing the artist role a bit. I do covers and I do backups in Justice Warriors, which I love. So to I get that satisfaction of it. I would like to draw more, but there's only so many hours in a day.
Does, your background of doing art though as well, has that helped you as you're working with other artists, kind of prepping, a comic book of how to prepare or how to write a script, and look at that?
Oh, I think so. I mean, for one, sometimes I'll sketch something out, particularly with Ben on Justice Warriors, because we trade ideas back and forth. I mean, we co-write it really.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll do sketches. I did do some character designs for Toxic Avenger. They weren't necessarily all used. It was more like very preliminary work that I did to show Trauma, just like how I would do this without because it wasn't pitched with Fred Harper on board. It was just pitched as me. It was pitched as me writing it, not
Right.
drawing it. But I just kind of got excited about the idea and threw in some art to like make it pop and make it be like, here's what we could do with like reimagining some characters and stuff. I don't know how other writers of comic books think, or some of them
Right.
draw and some of them don't. I mean, Grant Morrison, I know draws, and I know others that draw or thumb things out, and I think it helps to think visually. If you're not drawing, I mean, obviously you're thinking visually, I hope,
Yeah.
because it's a comic book, but I mean, I really think that understanding how to wrestle with the problem of a page is a really good thing for a comic writer to know about because, it's real easy to just start saying, well, this has to happen because of story reasons and this person needs to say this. And then you fill up a script because you create all these reasons why things need to happen and, you want to get your story out there. But then you're like, well, somebody's got to draw this and it's going to be crammed and it's not. So I think, having drawn a ton of comics, even though they were only short political cartoons, they
Yeah.
weren't longer stories, but that's really helped me figure out the economy of, a comics page and a comics panel. And I really try to make these things, they're sort of information dense in a way because I like to, put a lot of stuff in the background and everything, but I don't want the pages to be crammed, especially because, I'm not trying to do these comics are about things and I'm trying to make them. I wouldn't even say serious because in the way they're just silly, stupid comics. Like Justice Warriors has a poop cop. I mean, it's over the top ridiculous. They're about serious things, but like, at the end of the day, I'm making entertaining comics that have
Right.
mutants and violence, and I'm trying to leave enough space for that stuff so that it really shines as, what it is, which is a genre comic with like crazed mutants and body horror.
Which works out perfectly. Well, Matt, I want to respect your time. And I hesitate to ask because we've talked about that you have like 8 volumes of ideas for these two series. Is there anything that, that you're working on that we haven't that you want to mention that we haven't gotten to talk about yet, or is it all just
Well,
Justice
no,
Warriors and Toxic?
yeah, I'm not doing a lot else actually. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm wrapping up the writing on Toxic Avenger now, so I'm really hoping that I get more Toxic Avenger and Justice Warriors in the pipeline. That's sort of my project this month is to pitch some stuff. But I do have another comic I wrote coming out, a short story in EC Comics Cruel Universe #4. That's their new science fiction
yeah.
anthology, and it's very appropriate for the time. It's about an election, only this one involves the election of the first extraterrestrial president. So it's definitely in the vein of stuff I've been doing. It's satirical, and if you're familiar at all with Harvey Kurtzman's war comics
Okay.
from the old EC days, I used those as a lot of inspiration, kind of. It has war elements because I was reading a ton of his comics before I wrote this and was just blown away by how good I thought they were.
Yeah.
We could talk about the second issue of Toxic Avenger a little bit.
Yeah, let's do
I
it.
don't know. I mean, that's coming out. Boy, I should know the date. I don't know. It's coming out the 12th, I think, of November. I'm pretty sure, or the 13th is next Wednesday. I think it
Yeah.
comes out then.
Yep.
So, I did see one thing that people have said about Toxic Avenger #1. Most everybody liked it. They liked the reverse chronology thing. They liked the new take on Toxie, but some people said like it's not violent enough. It wasn't really R-rated. And there's a reason for that, mostly because I didn't, we were focusing on the origin issue. But
Right.
if there was any concern, I think I will hopefully please everyone with issue 2 because issue 2 is like totally gross and over the top.
Yes. As someone who has gotten to check out issue two, I can say it definitely follows along with the movie a little bit more when you're talking about the over the top um gross out stuff and violence. And so it definitely pops for sure.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see how it goes. I think it's kind of interesting to see who this book is for, like it's doing
Right.
pretty well. And I'm like, I know there's a lot of Toxic Avenger fans, but I don't know how many, I don't know. Are people buying this to check it out? I think most people, I've heard people say this, that Toxic Avenger is almost like an idea to a lot of people. Like they vaguely remember it. They're not like fans. They maybe saw the movie or they just know about it. Like when I was pursuing this, I asked my mom if she knew what Toxic Avenger was, and she did, which, if you knew my mom, is pretty remarkable. She doesn't follow pop culture or care about this stuff at all. So he's been around enough in people's heads that they're like, oh yeah, it's like he's got a mop, he's a mutated, they don't know a lot about it, but if that's enough to maybe get people to pick it up and be interested in it, I hope to hook them on it.
Well, it is because I feel like that I am that perfect category. Like I've seen the poster, I've had the image in my mind. I know I saw the movie at some point when I was a kid, and
Yeah.
now like with these comics coming out, I've gone back to the movies. I've gone back to the cartoon because, like you mentioned, Swamp Thing. Like that was I collected those action figures for that TV show that was like what
Yeah.
6 episodes. It had a lot.
Yeah, I remember that. I had that too, and then the RoboCop ones with the caps, I had those.
So good, so
I
good.
actually I bought a couple of the Toxic Crusaders toys. I'm not a toy guy at all, but I bought a couple of them not because I'm writing it. I was just
Yeah, you
like,
got
oh,
to
I
have the
want
inspiration while
to
you're
have
sitting there
these
at
on
the
the I could
desk.
justify it because I had to pay like I don't know, not crazy amounts, but more than I would have paid when I was a kid for them. Just to put them on my desk and be like, yeah, I'm writing these characters. This is
Yeah.
cool. So, so yeah, I mean, I think the second issue, again, it deals with bullying a lot. It's he basically has a giant monster fight, and I would even say that's most of the whole issue. Honestly,
It really
I
is.
wanted
It's
to just go all out for it, and I mean, it's not an issue where there's a lot of characters sitting around a table talking. It's it's a lot of action.
right. Well, and I've heard it said like a good comic book needs a lot of action and some dialogue to get you there. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's nonstop. But I think you are trying to find that balance of how do you appease old fans and how do you bring in new fans, right? Like,
yeah,
we talked at the CXC convention in Columbus, briefly, and my shop owner is a diehard Toxic Avenger fan. And so
Yeah.
like when I knew that before, not really even knowing the series, but when I saw the announcement for the comic, I messaged him. I'm like, you're about to get really excited. And so like he read issue one, and like so we've always were he's wanting to know what I think as someone who hasn't been a fan. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you think as a fan? Like, did it work? And it's been working for both of us.
That's good to hear, man. Because I was a little bit you never know how fans can go. They love you until they hate you, and they give and they take. They can be, I think, in comics, creators have weird relationships with fans, or fans have weird relationships with them because they ultimately like the thing more than
Right.
they like you usually. But yeah, I don't know. I think most people have liked it so far, and I think if you do, then you will probably like the rest of the series. I mean, it's there are some surprises that I plan to throw in there that especially in issue 3, you'll understand that there's a lot more going on here. And then I mean, if you read the first issue, it's fair to say that the company behind this is not on the up and up. That's not spoiling anything, but you'll see a
Right.
lot more. You'll see a big twist, I guess, a big revelation maybe in issue
Okay.
3, and then I think, especially if you're familiar with the cartoon, then you'll really understand what I'm trying to do.
Well, this is just going to make wherever it is on Plexi or Tubi, the cartoon me, we have to go binge all those a lot more. So
I
I'm
think,
ready.
and I mean, yeah, I think they're kind of like X-Men in the way that I really revere or the X-Men cartoon from the 90s. I have a lot of, who doesn't love that
Right.
intro and the theme song and all the cool episodes they had. But then after X-Men 97, which was great, I went back with my kids and started watching some of them, and I was like, oh yeah, they're not really good objectively. I mean, they're just like cheap
Right.
animation. And Toxic Crusaders is like that too, but it has cool ideas. In fact, I've rewatched a lot of them, but I was thinking, if we go ahead with more series, I sort of want to binge it and then like find an episode that I can do like a really good like updated take on.
So gang, like I said, at the time of this recording, issue two will have hasn't dropped, but when you're watching and listening, it'll be in your shops. So go pick up issue two of Toxic Avenger, read it, let us know what you think as well. Matt, thank you so much for taking some time talking about comics with me.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, man. It's really good.
Yeah. Gang, again, go to your local shops, buy Toxic Avenger, check out Justice Warriors if you haven't yet. Matt, where can people follow along with you and what you got going on?
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on all social media as Matt Bors, Bors. Yeah, pretty much all of them. You can find me there. I just post the same things across all of them, basically,
Nice.
about my work and whatnot.
So you will get to then follow along with Matt so you can see all the updates of stuff coming out and dropping. But with that being said, gang, thanks so much for watching. And hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out.